we almost roast the tech dude because we're like, what the crap were you thinking?
Yeah.
Why are you doing these things?
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is we could roast the leadership for going, you arrogant, selfish, narcissistic, whatever throw whatever fun word we want to throw in there. Why didn't you have that conversation? Why don't you engage in that particular way?
Yeah.
And both are true, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Both things are true. And unfortunately, we got to figure out how to bring people together so that we can have one good conversation and go, hey guys, if this is the goal, then you have to come together to be able to meet the goal. If that makes sense.
Dude, it's been, we haven't talked, but I finally met Ella on a Zoom call or something. Hopefully I meet her in person. And I don't know if
she
she's
might
around
show
here,
up. I think she's showing up later today. Yeah, she works here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Okay.
Nanny's on Thursdays, so she's usually not here. But when she's done nannying, she's going to come back.
That's cool. That's cool to meet her. Nice. Yeah, we kind of went through the same thing. I don't know if I told you this, Olivia and I started a church out of our house last year.
Yeah, you did tell me that.
And, so
you told me that at the
probably
the national community.
Yeah. So now we're not meeting at our house because it was just absolutely bananas. Like we were outnumbered by kids, really. And so we have 20 something kids, and my son Joel, who's 5, is the oldest.
Wow.
And we were like, bro, this is getting out of control. So we actually now meet at MxU on Sundays.
Okay.
Which works great because we have the back warehouse space that's actually, we just set up for kids, and then the adults just meet up in front.
You're a church planner.
Yeah, he's a church planter.
So my buddy Nate, who I was telling you about, he's pastoring it.
I love that guy. He's super cool.
Yeah.
I don't think I've met Nate.
He came to the national community pop-up and played host. It was great. And he's a great dude. Super chill.
I can't believe I haven't met him.
He's incredible. So Nate actually lived with us for a year or so. Long time ago before he got married, and he and I have been just buds for a really long time. So they moved out to Knoxville when we did.
Mm-hmm.
And
from where?
They were in San Diego actually working at North Coast. And then before that he was at Bayside. So we met each other in college, and he is like a brother to me. So he actually just,
isn't that Dennis Choi way back in the day?
Yep.
We're working with them now.
Oh, you are?
We are.
So
on a couple small projects. Yeah.
Larry, I don't know if Larry's still a senior pastor.
Jake Cody is connected to them somehow.
Yeah. Okay.
And
that
they
makes
reached
sense,
out.
West Coast.
They're great. And so anyways, Nate just now transitioned full-time into pastoring the church, and it's been great. It's been really good.
Wow,
That's
man.
awesome.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's been really fun. But it goes back to what we were saying, that what do we need and what are we looking for? And for us, it was man, we just need to do it because we kept looking around.
Yeah.
And it wasn't bad. It was just it's just not the right fit for our family. So let's go do this.
Yeah. And I think the difference for us is I have a lot of I'm a complex individual, if you don't know, but I think when it comes down to it, it's I want so desperately to be connected to leadership and leaders and want to help and be an influence and to have conversation. I just am in a season of my life where I don't want to lead in that capacity, if that makes sense. And so a lot of times when people hear ex-church planter, doing what we do with Summit, I've been involved in so many different things, pastor's kid, Bible college, and biblical studies and theology degree, teaching pastor. They go, oh my gosh, we need you. And I'm I did a lot of those things, man, out of a lot of unhealthy motivations. Yeah. So no, actually, I don't think you do need me.
That's the thing with churches,
I have all these things, but that doesn't mean I'm healthy.
Yeah, churches should allow people in that position to just show up and heal and be a part of the congregation and not recruit. I deal with that all the time. As soon as they find out I was a creative pastor, worship pastor, they're like, hey, man, no pressure, but you could come sing with us. And I'm like,
right.
I just want to show up with my family and, be a part of
be in community.
You know?
It was weird, man. a couple of different communities that we've plugged into. And honestly, I was on the teaching team at a local church here for a little while. I didn't teach all the time, but I was a part of a lot of those things. I led a arts and creative conference. I did, and there was all kinds of stuff that we were connected to. My wife was on staff there.
Yeah.
All that was really beautiful. But in reality, like, I think we never, and this is a running story in my life of going, I can do all of these things. And I felt like I should do these things, or I have to do these things, or I must do these things because of the degree I have, the family heritage I have, all this stuff. And still trying to answer that whole thing of like, what does it mean to be called, right? Like, if you have a calling on your life, what does that mean, right? Yeah. And so, and I think at some point, like, I started to realize, like, I don't know which end is up and where's my identity lie? Yeah. Like, who am I? If you take all these things away. And I struggle to use this word because I don't think I'm using it in the way that I think some people would take it. It's like, I think the last several years, there's been this complete deconstruction of like who I am and who God's called me to be. Mm-hmm. Taking it all the way down to foundational places to go, okay, this is who I am when it's just me standing before the Lord.
Yeah.
And from there, like, getting myself into a place of comfortability of being able to own who I am in my own skin. Mm-hmm. And what is it that I do want to put my hands to? And I'm not sure that I'm ready yet. To be honest with you. And that's okay. Totally. But I think every time I stepped into a lot of those environments, there were places of like, oh man, you could teach this. Why am I teaching this class? You should teach this class. Hey, we should get you to do this small group. Hey, we should get you to do this. Or, hey, do you want to come and teach? Do you want to come? And I'm like, yes and no. Like, I would say yes to you because I feel like I should, because that's the right thing to do. If I'm called, or if I'm, I've served in a pastoral capacity before, or this or that and the other. And in reality, I think I would find myself not bringing a real offering or a gift. I was doing something out of obligation, or doing something out of trying to appease, versus going, this is truly my gift that I want to give. Yep. And so I think that for me, why I've pulled back so hard is that it's been this really interesting time of me and my family going, okay, this defined us for years, and this is what was expected of us from years, or this is what we've walked through, and this is what we must do. And I think now we're going, but what do we want to do? What's God really leading us into, versus us feeling like we're driven into it? And it's true that, Jesus with his disciples always said, come follow me, right? Yeah. He never drove anybody. He never threw down the gauntlet and was like, let me whip you into shape and get you into this particular position. And so ultimately, if you feel like you're being driven, I would say that's not necessarily the Lord. Yeah. If you feel like you're following, then I think that it is the Lord.
Yeah, that's really good.
And so I think the devil drives. Jesus says, come follow. Yeah. So it's the way I've always come.
I wish there was more of an emphasis on who you're called to be and not what you're called to do. There's so much emphasis on like, what am I putting my hands to? And there's so much emphasis of that in local church, but man, I wish there was just more of an emphasis on who is God called you to be. Yeah. Like, let's live there. And then out of who you're called to be, that should drive what you're called to do, or what you put your hands to in that season. Yep. And so there's just every church right now, there's almost a formula that to get you to, hey, what you're going to put your hands to and how that's going to help the community. Yep. And in a lot of ways, it can be very, almost a distraction for the individual. It's like, let's focus on who you're called to be. Like, if we can focus on that, then a lot changes. A lot changes in your community. A lot changes at your church. A lot changes with the people around you, in your family. Yeah. If my focus is on who am I? Who is God calling me to be today? A lot changes.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and so much what we're talking about is identity. Like, we've just put our identity in the things that we're doing. Warren, you guys know Warren from Life Church, and Warren and I sat down a while back, and he was talking through this idea of, hey, you take everything away from what you're doing. Like, are you okay? like genuinely, are you okay?
Yeah.
And like for me, I don't think so. I'm still figuring it out, you know, like because we attach our identity to work and even family and other things, church and everything in our lives. Like we'll just kind of attach ourselves to these things. But like, I mean, for me, I love backpacking. There's times I'll go backpacking and I got nothing to attach myself to.
Yeah.
And it's I've had some pretty anxious filled moments, like anxiety filled moments in those times, recognizing, oh dude, I'm not good.
Yeah.
Like, and I have to face that or else I'm just going to keep lying to myself and keep going down this road and stuffing myself with like, what's the next thing I can attach my identity to?
Yeah. And I think for me, I echo so much of that and empathize with so much of that feeling. I think for me, the first 5 years of me being in Colorado were an absolute dumpster fire because ultimately I felt so like a failure because I wasn't putting my hands to an actual like real ministry thing. Like I wasn't preaching, I wasn't teaching, I wasn't leading a community, I wasn't playing music in that particular way, you know, like I used to. And I think that, you know, I've had all these childhood messages, whether it was other leaders in my life that I grew up under, or even my own parents that would call and go, yeah, but what about the call of God on your life? Like, what are you doing right now? Like, there was all this like, oh my gosh, like fear that was being like, they were being like led by to call me and to say those things. And I was like, man, I have gotten kind of, you know, twisted up in this whole thing of a sense of, I always connected. If you would have said, what are you called to do? Or what are you called to? I would immediately go into what I'm doing, right? Well, I'm called to preach. I'm called to this. I'm called to that. No, I'm called to be a son.
Yeah.
And I'm called to be a disciple.
Yeah.
I'm called to love my family.
Yeah.
I made a covenant with my wife.
Yeah.
It's the only covenant I have right now. It's between God and me and me and her.
Yeah.
And so ultimately I'm like, okay, I need to be able to be a good husband. I need to be able to be a light in a dark place. These are all things that have nothing to do with standing on stages and playing music or, you know, preaching a sermon or leading a small group.
Yeah.
And ultimately, ministry should be the overflow of the things that are in your heart.
Yeah.
And calling doesn't change. This is what I'm called to. These are the bedrock things as who does God say that I am?
Yeah.
And from there, we get to do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But whether I am building houses or whether I am a plumber or whether I'm standing on a stage or whether I'm leading a small group or I lead a company, I'm called.
Yeah.
There is a calling on my life because of who Jesus says that I am and who I know I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think that for the longest time, I was so like, I felt like I was a kite that no one was holding on to. I was literally just blowing all over the place in the wind. And it was chaos.
Yeah.
And the ups and the downs almost killed me and almost destroyed me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't tethered and anchored to who does God say that I am? And I think that identity is probably the one thing that I think the devil will use over and over and over again. I don't care who you are and how long you've been serving Jesus.
Yeah.
It's one area that he will try and attack and annihilate. It's all the way back to Jesus. He is baptized, comes out of the water, and it says, "In this is my son in whom I'm well pleased." The first attack on him was an attack of identity when he says the Spirit led him to the wilderness. And the first thing that the accuser said was, if you're the Son of God.
Yeah.
He questions the very thing that was just spoken and reaffirmed in him. And so ultimately, I think there is this place of, if I can get you out of your identity or even into a place of questioning it, then ultimately I have you.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're going to sit there on the merry-go-round of crazy and distraction becomes the thing that permeates your life.
Yep.
There's I think a place of, you know, when people, let's say you have an audio engineer or a singer or a pastor, whoever, whenever a lot of times those things are taken away or they move out into a different season, a lot of times people are challenged and going, well, who am I now, or what am I called to do now? But who you're called to be, again, should drive all those things. So it doesn't matter if you are a garbage man. Like, I'll give myself as an example. My mission is to impact, influence, and inspire people to be better. Mm-hmm. That's who I feel like I'm called to be. So whether I'm a garbage man or whether I'm, running audio or singing on a big stage or whatever it is, I can still be that person no matter what it is that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And so as life changes, as seasons change and things change, I'll get a lot of times people will see me and going, hey man, are you not doing this anymore? Are you not doing this? I'm like, no, but I'm still the person that God's called me to be. Yeah. So identity is really important. Sometimes people rest their identity in what it is that they're doing. The problem is that when that's taken away, God forbid, if I'm a drummer and I get into an accident and I can't play drums anymore, now who am I called to be? Right. Mm-hmm. If my identity is in I'm a drummer, mm-hmm. then when that's taken away, what next? What now? So that's why I wish there was so much more emphasis on, hey, who has God called me to be, not what I'm doing. Let's let the doing be a product out of who I'm called to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and obviously a lot of this is human stuff, but why do you guys, I feel like the church, there's still something unique in the church where this is kind of rampant, honestly. Why do you guys think that is?
Well, I mean, I think that's if we could answer that, that's like the $1 million question.
Well, like
I think that this is a thing that's been going on for, ever almost. Well, yeah. And I think that I could start to speculate down a couple of different roads, but I think what it really comes down to is like, what we celebrate is what will be repeated. And so if you think about it, going all the way back, like when you look at like every denomination or every little, group of, when you look in the church world, you start to see like, who are the people we put on pedestals, or what are the things we put on pedestals, right? It's the great evangelists of our day. I can start going down a list, and even my, camp of churches that I grew up in, and go, man, they were it, man. Like everybody wanted to be like that guy, or everybody wants to sing like so-and-so, or everybody wants to have to be the next Chris Tomlin, or whatever the case may be, or the next, Rick Warren or whoever, right? And so I think we look at that and we start kind of putting ourselves in paths of going, man, if they did that, look at how successful they've been. Look at how great they are. Think about all the things that they're doing. Yeah. I want to be just like them. Yeah. And so I think that on one hand, that's cool to have inspiration. And to be inspired by these leaders or these people in these positions and go, man, like I want to be the next whatever great audio engineer or the next whoever. That's awesome. That's so stinking cool. But who's God called you to be? And instead of spending time asking harder questions of yourself and sitting quietly before the Lord and saying, Father, who do you say that I am? Mm-hmm. And being quiet long enough to see if the Lord will speak to you in those moments, or put some impressions in your heart. We actually just try to shortcut it. Yeah. And we go, no, I'm going to act like them. I'm going to talk like them. I'm going to prepare like them. I'm going to study like them. I'm going to mimic them. How many guys right now do we run across that are planting churches and doing things and standing on stages and speaking that look at guys like Judah Smith and, a handful of these other dudes that are, rocking it right now. Judah is fully Judah. There's no one else that's going to be Judah. Yeah. And that's great. Yeah. Be you. Like, we don't need to just buy the Judah Smith starter kit, get the glasses, the funky clothes, and try and make it happen. Yeah. But instead, we sit there and we go, man, let's just copycat what they're doing. Yeah. Let's rip a few pages off of their playbook and let's just go try and do. And at some point, I had this old worship leader friend of mine who stood on a stage one time, and it was so interesting to me. He goes, hey, these songs that we're about to sing were birthed out of this season. I feel like there's maybe a handful of you guys, and he was going through some stuff, and he's like, maybe there's a handful of you guys that resonate with that. He goes, tonight it's going to be okay for you to borrow my language and my words. But I pray that God puts a song in your heart and that we open a door for you to be able to express fully what's really going on in you. And we're going to make space for that tonight. So for a few moments, borrow my words, but let those be a springboard for you to dive off into your own expression. And I think that so many of us forget that we have to be ourselves and that it's really okay. Like your fingerprints are different than my fingerprints. Your DNA is different than my DNA. And I should celebrate that you are uniquely you. And I need to celebrate that I'm uniquely me instead of me going, dang, dude, that dude's super cool. I'm just going to copycat exactly what he does. The world doesn't need more copycats. The world needs a bunch of different people fully operating in their gift and who they are and their identity. And yet I think so much of the time, the reason we're doing this and why we've continued to perpetuate it is because it's a shortcut. We love, how many get rich quick schemes have we seen? How many you can lose 20 pounds in 10 days by doing X? There's a million things that we're always trying to do to be more efficient and to shortcut real work. And this is real work.
Go ahead.
I was going to say there's a sometimes people are looking for these glamorous moments. And I think, if I know a lot of production leaders or pastors that really don't even know the people on their team. They haven't even slowed down enough to go, who's on my team? What are they dealing with in their lives because of the grind of Sundays coming? And I have to have this high standard of excellence. And I think they're looking for these large, big, impactful moments, or to be the Judas of the world, or the Chad Veaches, or whoever. That it seems so much more glamorous. But I think, I remember growing up, and there was a pastor in our community that he would come over to our house, and he would sit down with my parents, and they would just have coffee and eat donuts from a local donut shop. And he just discipled them. And there was so many impactful moments I remember from that. And the services that we went to on Sunday were never these big, glamorous things. I don't even think, in the 90s, there weren't many mega churches throughout the country. It's a pretty new thing. I mean, we talk to people all the time. We're like, hey man, we heard you just launched a church. How many people? I heard this dude say this the other day, man, we only have 1,500 people on this weekend. I was like, only? Or only 500? Are you kidding me? You got 500 people showing up every single Sunday to an event. It doesn't matter where you go. If you go to a club, to any event, any place, you got 500 people showing up consistently every week. That's crazy. Those numbers weren't like that when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And so we throw out all this stuff, and everybody's shooting for this. We got to be bigger. We got to be bigger. It has to be better. We got to have bigger lights. We have to have all this stuff. And those are not the most impactful things in people's lives a lot. Just sit down and be present with somebody, and not, instead of pulling people in and going, hey man, what can you do for us? Or what can you do in our community? Find out, hey, who are you? Where are you at in your walk with God? Where are you at in your family? Just in life in general. Those things are really impactful, and actually change people's lives. And so I think that's more of the life change and in people's lives instead of the event. And so often our focus is on this event on Sunday. And there's so much time and effort to, we used to say, feed the beast on which is the Sunday experience, that we don't even know what's happening in our team's lives, that people are dealing with this in their family, or this person may have died, or this person, this thing happened. Those are the big impactful moments that really, really change.
Well, it's like, it almost feels like, I mean, I know for myself, evangelism became somewhat of an idol in my life. And I felt convicted recently. I was a paid evangelical for a good portion of my life. And I can't tell you one name of a person who I met who was far from Jesus, who I walked with and modeled Jesus's ways. And then saw transformation and got to walk with them on the other side. Couldn't tell you one name. And I still wrestle with that today of like, hey, I always love to make macro change. But what God has called us to is to walk in his ways, not to go do a thing. It's to walk in his ways. So what does that look? I have to answer for that.
Yeah.
So like, I better get to work.
Yeah.
Because I'm 30 years old and I feel like I've made an idol out of the wrong things, man. And so all that to say, I resonate a lot with what you're saying.
Yeah. I think there's I too, like I empathize. I like how you use that word idol. When these guys made me do a Summit TV story to kind of talk about some of my journey. And I think that's really what truthfully platform ministry for me became an idol. It was the thing that I pursued that in the name of Jesus, in the name of God, in the name of proclaiming the good news of the gospel. But in reality, it was more about what was filling my bucket. And was I fulfilling the prophetic words over my life about greatness and about this and about that. And ultimately, like I pursued that with everything that was within me. And more so than I pursued him. And I think that I have this phrase that has haunted me for years, because there's an old mentor of mine who says, man, so many on the path to greatness get tripped up by fame. And I think for me, I wanted to be famous more than I wanted to be great. And I think that for me, I wanted people to know my name more than I wanted them to know Jesus's name.
Yeah, it's common, man. That's
and
our,
I think
that's our society.
That's just me being raw and honest. But I think that so many of us don't ever stop and think about that kind of stuff and really start to ask those tough questions of ourselves. Of going back to where you started, Max, with this, is to go, if I were to remove all these things from my life that I'm doing, would I be okay? And I think that that answer fluctuates for me, even in this season of my life. And going, man, I think I would be all right. And then I go, oh gosh, and I start to panic and I start to freak out and I start to go, oh my word, what am I going to do? Again, it's I immediately go to what would I do? Not who am I? And that's the thing. And I was just finishing this book the other day, and it was like talking about just retracing the steps of where has God proven himself faithful? What are the hard challenges that he's walked with you through? And whether they came out good or they came out bad, like what did you notice in those seasons, right? And the truth is that he's never left me. I've never been forsaken. He's always proven himself faithful. He's always, been kind and loving. He's always working on my behalf. He's always pulling me closer. He's never moved. I have. And so ultimately, I think there's this thing of going, man, like, I think I would be okay. I probably would panic a couple, 3 times. I may have to have a few extra therapy sessions that week, or 2 or 4. But I think I would be all right. Why? Because I can look back at the past and go, he was right there with me in the midst of all of these things that I've walked through already. Now, granted, I get to say that as a 45-year-old man who's seen some things. And so I don't know if I could say that in the moment, 18 plus years ago. I wasn't able to say that 20 years ago when I first moved here, right? So like to Colorado. And I think from being a church planter and having the whole world blow up in front of me. So like I have life and I have season and I have experience with the Lord that now gives me this particular place of understanding. And so that's where I'm coming from. But I think that, that's a really, identity is such an incredible thing that I think is really important, whether you're standing behind a console, or you're standing on a stage, or you're being a plumber, or whether you're owning a business, or whether you're, whatever. It's like, there has to be this quest within your own soul of going, who does God say that I am?
Well, it honestly, it can slow down growth in leadership on a team when a person finds their identity in just doing the work. A lot of times people go, I'm running front of house, but you'll have teams of people. There's teams at churches that are not growing because somebody's not passing the baton, because they find their identity in doing. It's like what I was talking, you and I were talking about this earlier. We were talking about leadership. One of the things I bring up to my teams all the time is I ask them, on the football field, who holds the authority?
Yeah.
Or what is the authority? Most people say, well, it's the quarterback. And I'm like, no, the authority is the ball. And whoever has the ball is carrying the authority. So if I'm a quarterback, so leadership for me is I'm going to distribute the authority well into the hands of capable people so they can score. That transfer of the authority is really, really difficult for some people because their identity is found in carrying it. But really, we need to be distributing it in the capable hands of other people so they can score. Yeah. That's the name of it. So we have growth that's not happening because people find the identity in doing instead of going, hey, let me distribute this. And now I have this leader who is growing because they're carrying authority. You know, we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, or I think it was last week. And now you turn around and now you have 5-6 people who are capable because you stepped out of the way.
Right.
That's really difficult for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, I love that analogy. And okay, so Nick, you had said something that kind of triggered something for me. When we don't have some of this identity stuff figured out, it can cause us to go outward and start looking at everybody else. Like, look at so-and-so pastor trying to be famous over there. Or my senior pastor drives me crazy. Like, he's always trying to do this or this or this. And what I'm learning in my own life is anytime I tend to go outward and start pointing at others, I recognize there's something inward I haven't figured out.
Yeah.
And I find this a lot in talking with churches and guys and gals who are working in ministry, struggling with these things, going, how can we be how can we give some practical advice around this of like, hey, if you're struggling in this area of you find you're constantly just looking outward at other churches or you're looking at your own church and just constantly displeased with what you see or what you're a part of because it doesn't measure up to what maybe you desire it to be. What are some practical ways that we can actually look at ourselves and make sure, hey, am I rooted in my identity here?
Man, I'm in this right now, even here at Summit, where everything right now is around one word, and that is better. Like what is it that I can do to get better, to better myself? Not just in my craft or my leadership or anything, but just as an individual. How do I grow? Whether that's a relationship with God, whatever it is, how can I get better? And I think my focus tends to actually, it affects a whole lot because I'm not looking at all these different things. I'm focusing on, hey, how can I incrementally get better at what it is I'm doing or who it is that I am? And the hope is that I look up months from now and there's a lot of things that have changed, not just in my life, but hopefully things around me, because my focus was just here. It's just being present in the moment and who I am, and just getting better incrementally. I think that's a huge thing of where I'm at right now is just, well, what does that mean for me better?
I like that thought. I think for me, what I'm learning through some really beautiful relationships in my life, when I can get super externally focused. I can be super critical of others. And a lot of times I'm not fully aware of it. Like it just happens. It's normal, right? It's my flesh coming to the surface. And I'm being led around by that. What I've started to do, first off, is awareness is key. As soon as I start to find myself in that place of critical, or I find myself in that place of judgmental, or I find myself in this place of constantly looking at others with a negative tone, first off, you got to get aware of that. As soon as you become aware of it, then what do? You start to get really curious. Start asking yourself some tougher questions. What is it about that person or about that thing or about that ministry that's triggering to you? And what is it about your present situation that's making you, so you got to start doing this like excavation process.
Reflection.
You got to start really looking inward, to start asking yourself some tough questions. And then, like for me, there's, I'll just use a practical example. There's certain times when I see people act out in selfishness, right? And I go, dang, and I get frustrated. And, maybe I bring a little extra heat to the table on that one, and my tongue gets a little sharper and I get a little frustrated, and it's just like, but why? Well, because I possess all those same exact things, because I am totally and completely capable of being that selfish and just as much, if not more so. And yet I do all of these things in my life to make sure that I don't show up like that. Yeah. So in reality, what's happening? I'm jealous that they get to show up like that and people tolerate it and I don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
And so ultimately it's like, that's a real simple thing, but that's just you can start to apply that same kind of philosophy to a lot of these different deals. And so I think that there is this place of getting curious, begin to do your own personal work of going, why does this frustrate me? What is it about this that's triggering for me? What is it about yourself? Or how can that be a mirror for you? Right? That's like a great question. Or for your ministry or for your situation. And then from there, I think you get to step into a moment of going, truthfully, what can I control?
Yeah.
I can control myself.
Yeah.
I can control my actions. I can control my attitudes, my heart posture, and the things that are right in front of me. And I think so much of the time it's easier for me to just go ahead and be critical of somebody else than it is for me to sit and do my own work and to make sure that I'm good. Yeah. And so I think that there's some stuff around that I think is important. And I think that also too, it's like, it's classic going all the way back to when I was a kid. My mom would say, hey, go do your homework. I knew I needed to go do my homework. I have to turn it in tomorrow when I get to school.
Yeah.
But I would do everything but my homework. I would clean my room. I would clean the kitchen. I would clean the bathroom. I would go do all these different things. Were they good things? Yes. But I was still avoiding the hard thing that I know I needed to do.
There's another practical thing too is coaching, whether it be pastoring, therapy, whatever. I think people have to, going back to the awareness, we have blind spots and we need people in our lives that are going to call those things out or point those things out and help us get to the next level. If we're talking about better, we have to have awarenesses. And the only way you can have those awarenesses is if you have outside influence of people going, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and help you get to the next stage. That's a huge, huge thing. I think there's so many times we get frustrated with people and sometimes they just don't have an awareness of where it is they are in that place in their lives. So awareness is big. I used to really hate that word. It was like, I used to feel like awareness is like, it just, for some reason it drove me crazy, but I realized this in my own life, man, especially the past 3 years, especially has been, if I have an awareness of something, then I can actually bring change to it. You can't bring change to something that you don't know it's there.
Yeah, man. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So this is something that for myself, practical things that have been really helpful to me. There's this old book by Byron Katie, I want to say. It talks about 4 questions to kind of ask in these moments of whether you're, really kind of comes down to the way we judge others and we judge circumstances. And I noticed in my own life, so it's called The Work is the framework she talks about. And I'm going to leave a lot out here, but what I found out was for myself, I was believing a lot of things that just aren't true. So it'd be like, my pastor wants to be famous, right? And I'm going to go judge him over that. And the first question to ask is it true? Yeah. And then the second question to ask is, can you be absolutely certain that it's true? And then you keep going down this framework. And then at the very end of the framework, she challenges you to turn it around. I want to be famous. And then really start to consider, hey, it's just this, we've got to reflect. And I think what you said, Nick, is so powerful. We have to learn how to reflect on our own thought world and how we view these circumstances.
Yeah.
Because all of it, I truly believe, for myself, what I've learned at least, just comes down to insecurity, lack of identity, or placing my identity in things that aren't true.
Yeah.
And so these are simple things that the Bible talks about, but it doesn't mean they're easy. Yeah. Right. And so it's like, but we have to continue to go back to, we got to stop lying to ourselves about a lot of these things.
Wow.
And I think that, especially in ministry, because it's information overload. We're constantly hearing things in staff meeting. We're constantly hearing, and it's all well-intentioned, right? Like pastors trying to help us and lead our team in a God-honoring way more often than not, right? But constantly hearing these things, and we then go attach those things to our identity of how we need to be.
Yeah.
And then we apply those things to others.
Yeah. I think I love what you're saying there. And I think that it's so key for us to understand, like when we're in those places of judgment or we're in those places of experiencing even secondhand information or like the trickle down effect, right? When we're in these different communities or organizations, it's like we have to start to go, okay, how much of this is fact? How much of this is story? Let's get those things out there. What's the narrative that I'm making up? Those types of things. And then really get down to like the nitty gritty of what's happening. But I think that, it wasn't, I have so much more compassion and grace for leaders today than I did, 10 years ago. Just as I've, been a part of even, we're a medium-sized organization, right? But I know that just some of the conversations or some of the things that I've heard or seen over the years of being here, it's like I'm so far removed from certain aspects or certain individuals in the organization. And I've heard stories or I've heard, oh man, this judgment that came down the line. I'm like, dude, that's so far from true. That's not even a reality. And so I go, man, if that's true in even my experience, in this organization, how much more so in some of these churches who I know have 200 plus people on staff, or 500 people on staff. It's like, dude, the amount of that like distance from those, moments of going, man, I know that person. I've walked life with that person. I know them every single, honestly, that's just not happening. Right. And so, so much of the time it's easier for us to, in the absence of clarity, or facts, we will kind of make up our own narrative. Like we will start to create our own story. And we can really start to believe those things, which can get us off track and off kilter in a hurry. And so it's, again, going back to what you're saying, like we've got to stop that. We've got to start separating some things out. And then we actually have to start looking inward. What's my role to play in this? What's going on in my life right now? What's happening with me? It's so easy to judge others by, their character or their actions or what we think, and jump to some conclusions. But in reality, like, are you keeping your side of the street clean? Like, maybe that's probably something we should focus on, you probably got some weeds in your grass too, it's,
that stuff has to be invited though, like in order to get to that point, people have to invite pastoring. Pastoring is not something that just happened. You have to invite that in. Coaching, you have to invite it.
And there's so much freedom in that. And that's the thing is like, it's not, because I've struggled with that, right? And if you were to come to me, Nick, and be like, bro, you got to clean up your side of the street. There's times in my life I wouldn't have been able to hear that.
No.
And so that's like, and that's where it's kind of like, we have to, what you're saying, it's like, just try it out for a second. If you haven't done that, try it, and you'll find freedom in it.
And I think there's an element of coaching there. There's pastoring there. There's therapy. There's counselors. There's all kinds of things. More so what I was trying to say is like, constantly I need to be evaluating my side of the street. Because you're right. There's so many times in my life where if someone came to me and was like, bro, you need to clean this up. I was like, bro, for real?
Who do you think
I would have fought. But I think that something too that I think, Max, you brought up that I think is cool when we're talking about the word awareness. Like, I think I love coaching. I love all the things we just talked about, coaching and pastoring and counsel and all the stuff. I think for me, so I desire friendships and relationships with people who can hold the mirror a little closer and go, hey man, do you see this? But to be honest with you, I would say that doesn't happen too often it's actually one of those things I have to invite it in, if that makes sense. Hey man, can you just reflect to me, like, what are you seeing right now? That's where that starts to happen, because a lot of times that starts to look like conflict, and people don't love conflict. And even if they're the closest friend in the world that loves conflict, it's hard sometimes to pick up the phone and go, hey man, you did some things this week that I really just want to check you on. Like that's a difficult conversation. I know that's what we're supposed to have from a place of accountability and intentional relationships and all kinds of stuff. Like we all want those things, and we all could sit here today and amen that till we're blue in the face. But it wasn't until just recently I invited an outside therapist, like an outside of my friend group kind of person, into my life. And she made a statement on the first call that we had that I thought was so interesting. And yet I went, I kind of puckered a little bit and kind of sat back, where she goes, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to tell you what I see and to ask you tough questions. And I went, dang. And that just sat with me for a minute. And I'm like, how much of a godsend is this? Like you're not trying to navigate around this place of like, well, I got to see you at the barbecue later. You know, like I got to see you at work later. It was just like, no, I'm here to help you get better. And I'm going to say tough things to you. And it made me pucker, but it also made me like so grateful at the same time of going, how long it's taken for me to step into a place where I could be that challenged. And I got so excited because I'm like, I'm actually probably going to get to the root of some stuff. And I'm going to get better out of this.
Man,
and that's the thing that's important.
The biggest part in that, though, in order for us to get to a place where we have somebody in our lives like that, we have to have this awareness that I need that. That's the hardest part is to go, okay, I need that. So now I'm going to go seek it or invite it in. And getting to that place of, okay, I need this and I'm ready for that. It can be a lifetime for some people. But that's a huge part. And again, it's the awareness of, and I think there's also a humility in that of saying, I know I need to grow. I know I can always be better. How can that happen? Well, I'm going to invite in coaching or therapy or pastoring, whatever that may be for that individual. But that is a huge lift. Honestly, for me, getting to that place in my life where it was a consistent thing and I'm inviting that in for someone to be able to point those things out in me. Man, that was daunting. It was daunting. That first, but once you get over that little, I don't want to say little, that was, for me, it was a big hill. But no, that's really good.
I think that in ministry, I thought, I'm getting a paycheck now. I have a title. I have a congregation. I have responsibilities. I have the degree. I believed this lie that I didn't need that anymore. You know what I mean? I didn't need someone speaking into my life in that way. I was a professional, right? Like I'm fully paid for this, right? How immature was I? How stupid and foolish was I? But you know what's crazy is I talked to a ton of pastors, and I got a bunch of guys that I'm friends with that are in full-time vocational ministry, and all of them are like, man, I can't talk to anybody because I'm supposed to have it all figured out. And the truth is none of us have arrived. This side of eternity, none of us have arrived. And so you have to believe in scripture that we all study and preach and do the things. We're being changed from glory to glory. It's an ongoing process. It's every single day. There's a moment for the character and the nature of Christ to be revealed to us as we're pursuing him. And as a mirror gets to look into us and go, I'm not like that. I now get to change. I now am trying to allow those things to become evident in my life. And if I'm not changing, how am I preaching that everybody else? It automatically puts me on an up here kind of place of like, I'm above everybody. right? I've got the main line to Jesus because I'm standing on this stage. Truth is I'm just as jacked up as everybody else is. And I need to work through my junk every single day.
It's a dangerous place to be for somebody to be in a place where they feel like they have to have it figured out for everybody and they can't speak to anybody or don't have anybody to talk to.
Well, the
Such
platform
a bad place to be.
And the pedestal and the place of position that they're in is a lot of times for the pastor that's standing in that position, as they start to get that place, kind of like those lies whispered into their ears, those places actually become a prison and a cage because they isolate themselves. And when you isolate and get alone and you have no one to check you and you have no one to help you, you have no one you can speak to, no one you can turn to and go, I'm scared right now. I'm fearful or I'm struggling or I'm this. That's when we see people fall.
You know what though? You know, I think as a society, even I would say Christian culture, we put those leaders on that pedestal. Sometimes, a lot of times people will blame just the leader.
No.
But people put them there. People put them in that position. And I think sometimes people do it to really take the weight off of themselves for having to address and change those things in their own lives. We put all the weight and responsibility on these leaders for them to tell us what we're supposed to do. And it's unfortunate. The reason why a lot of those leaders are in those positions is because people put them there. People put them on this pedestal and they oh, that's my pastor. And they're supposed to have it all. And then, God forbid, those people do something human. And then it's like, oh, there's this huge fall from grace or anything like that because they are really, honestly, in an untouchable situation. Like people are viewing them as this pastor where they can't do anything wrong. Or they're supposed to have all the answers. And it's something, man, that I've seen for a long time is that people will put them there and honestly, in a lot of ways, idolize those leaders. But then the pressure on those leaders is that I'm supposed to have it all figured out. Who do I talk to? Now I'm in this dungeon or this trapped place where now I can't show the human side of me, or I can't show people that I'm dealing with something, or who is that I can talk to? I mean, we see it so many times, like in leadership throughout the country. We find out all these things and comes out later that, man, I didn't have anybody to talk to, or I was afraid to say this. That's really, man, like, I wish we can get to a place where people have the community, whether it's leaders or people in the church, where they can be open and honest about things they walk through, things that they believe, things that they're going through, things that they need to grow past or whatever, and not have a feeling of judgment that they're supposed to show up and have it all together.
100%. And if you're listening or watching right now, like, and any of this resonates with you, I think a lot of why we're having this conversation is to exemplify, like, hey, this has started, like, we have felt all that. And like, you being transparent, Nick, man, I appreciate that so much, because it actually speaks to me and helps me recognize, oh, okay, I'm not alone. Like, somebody else felt that. And because frankly, when you do realize, again, highest level here, we're talking about identity. When you realize that you've placed your identity in things that are outside of the Lord, it can be a pretty dark and depressing place. And then you finally realize the grace and mercy of God in those moments to go, oh, whoa, like, there's so much freedom now moving on from this. And that's what we want for our brothers and sisters.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, man, I've a couple things. I think it's so important for us to understand, like, every single morning, his mercies are new. His grace is new. There is not, I don't care if you're in the deepest, darkest pit right now of sin and turmoil and frustration, anger, angst, all the things. Cry out to the Lord. Ask for salvation and for rescue and for grace, and it's extended immediately the moment that you ask for it. And so I think that so many of us think, and we buy into almost the same kind of narrative that the prodigal son did, right? Of, oh man, I'm in too much I've done too much. I've gone too far. Maybe I can just come back and be a servant in my father's house. Yeah. I don't get to be a son anymore. It's like, really? Like that story is real, right? And I think that it's important for us to, no matter where you are, the moment that you ask for it, he's going to extend it. Yeah. His kindness is his character and his nature. It's the fabric of who he is. Yeah. And so I think it's scripture's really clear, right? It's the kindness of God that draws us to repentance. And so I think that we have to confess it, we have to repent, and then ultimately from there we have to, start to do the work. I mean, at some point the prodigal son had to get up and had to start walking home. Yeah. But he didn't even make it home before his father came running for him. Yeah. If that's the picture in scripture for him, it's the same picture for you and I. Yeah. And I think also too, that we have to find ourselves in this position of going, man, like, none of us will arrive. None of us will be perfect until we are standing face to face with Jesus. And so in heaven. And so ultimately, scripture's really clear around we are supposed to continually keep growing, and we're supposed to continually keep working on our stuff, and ultimately allowing who Jesus is to be worked into the fabric and the very nature of who we are. And I can tell you, because I'm human, I make mistakes every single day. And I know that right now, the things that are in my focus and in my purview is like, I want to be a better husband today than I was yesterday. I want to be a better father today than I was yesterday. I want to be a better leader for this organization than I was yesterday. Why? Because I'm literally trying to fill my time with what are things that are going to help me see all of my weaknesses, and all of my shortcomings, and how can I go maniacally like after them and eliminate them? Because ultimately, when to rip off another friend of mine, he said, "Man, when my kids get to heaven, I don't want them to see Jesus and go, 'Hey, man, you look like a stranger to me.'" Yeah. He goes, "I want them to get to heaven and go, 'You look like my dad.'" Yeah. And you're not a stranger because you look just like my dad. Yeah. And so for me, it's like, how do I begin to live my life in such a way where people can go, dang, he loved me well. Yeah. He always was trying to get better. He wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. I screw things up. But I will be the guy that's going to quickly say, I'm sorry, and own my crap, and be able to say, hey, this is what I'm working on. And hey, will you keep me accountable to this? Why? Because I'm not fearful of it. Yeah. Because I know that that's Christ's likeness being worked into my life, and I'm putting my salvation into a place of where it's becoming active and it's an action. It's not something that it's just a title that's on my name. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's like, you see Jesus when you look at me, or you see his character being reflected in me. That's what I think being a light to this world is all about. Yeah. Whether you're in full-time vocational ministry or whether you're a plumber, it doesn't matter. That's what that looks like.
There's a humility, in that. There's a, you're talking about, apologies. And I was talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to, but we're talking about parenting. And he was like, man, he has younger kids than me. And he's like, bro, you got any parenting advice for me? And I was like, nope, I don't. And he goes, I said, I do have this one thing. I said, man, I'm still obviously growing as a father. I said, but apologize frequently. Model what it looks like to apologize to your kids. He goes, to them? And I was like, yes, because you are going to mess up a lot. Yeah. So apologize to them frequently. And there's a humility that comes with that. You have to go like, I'm going to tell my kids, hey, I was wrong when I did that, or I was wrong the way I said that, or that's modeling what that looks like. And, but that takes a level of humility to be able to do that. But man, going back to really a theme of a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is humility. It takes humility in asking for help. It takes humility to apologize, to someone that you are leading. A lot of leaders, feel like they shouldn't apologize to people they're leading, that it's a weakness.
Or they don't have to.
Or they don't have to. Yeah. So it is important to model what that looks like, to apologize to people that you're leading in your life, and to show them, hey, I made a mistake here, but I'm going to course correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, we could go forever about this.
We could. I think we have.
Yeah, I think we have. And what's funny is those listening don't know, we had a completely different plan for today, but this is the conversation that needed to happen. And this is what happens when Sandstrom isn't here to hold down the fort. So Jeff is actually a Church of the Highlands mixing motion. He was really bummed he couldn't be here. He was texting me this week, like wanted to know every detail, because I know he really, really hates not being here. But if you have listened this far, and you might recognize, and you're watching, you might recognize we're not at MxU, we're at Summit.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for hosting and having us here.
You guys are family.
And
you're at home.
You know, I got to say to you guys, our relationship has changed over the past couple of years, and I'm pretty grateful for it. And just the way, honestly, Max, you kind of paved the way for a lot of that change. And there was a few key moments and conversations we've had over the last couple of years that have really knitted MxU and Summit together in a new way. And so I'm super grateful for you, Nick. As you were talking, I'm like, man, Nick has discipled me more than most in my life. And I'm super grateful. And we hang out maybe once a quarter, if that.
Yeah. But
every time we're together, you're intentional about the conversation. I'm super grateful. Thank you guys,
thank you.
Yeah. And I said earlier, I think before you got here, Nick, we've been kind of running around town here in Denver doing this and that. And when we came to Summit this morning, I'm like, I kind of feel like I'm home. It's nice. I get to like kick back and relax a little bit.
It's always cool to be around like-minded people. I think just the whole relationship, our relationship, I mean, even that's how I got to Summit, is just being around people that like-minded, that think similarly. You know, we don't have to try. Going back to even a lot of the phrases and the things that we say here at Summit, they came from just out of relationship and things that we were already doing years before. So, man, I'm grateful.
Yeah. So there's a lot we haven't talked about on the podcast that we were supposed to. I apologize. Check out the show notes. I think we got like content tomorrow dropping with Tony about Vista, which people have been asking for a ton. Apparently there's a lot of Vista consoles in churches still.
There is.
So anyways, training dropping tomorrow. Check it out. There's a bunch of other things that we probably missed. Check out the show notes, but we will see you next time.